It's time for Brush Street Beat presented by McLaren Healthcare. Today's guest is sports writer for the Detroit News, Chris McCosky, a returning guest. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to join us again today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So you wrote an interesting article about the difficulties that the Tigers are going to face during this offseason. But before we get into that, I want to hear your recap of the season. What impressed you most? What were you not very impressed with?
It's so hard to even evaluate or assess anything that we saw in 58 games, especially given the climate that the games were played in, the environment, the fact that the spring was broken up into two small parts. It's just hard to like what we saw of Matt Boyd. Is that who he is? I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I think the guy I think after the rough start, he had one bad start out of his last 4 or 5. So he was coming up. He was getting better each time. And if there was more time, maybe the Matt Boyd that we think he is would have showed up. Is Willie Castro a 350 hitter? We saw that in 32 games. Is that going to be the same in 160? It's just so hard to evaluate this. It's hard to know what you saw, to be honest with you. I think it was really valuable that Casey Mize and Tarek Skubal got 8 starts between them. I think it's valuable that Jamer Candelaria established himself a little more as part of the foundation going forward. Those things are beneficial, but there's way more questions than answers coming off this 58 games.
Chris, I'm constantly asked, what did you think of the Tiger season this year? Much like yourself, I watched all 58 games, and I grade this season as a double E. And people look at me and say, double E, what are you talking about? And I say encouraging and entertaining, meaning that you're right. It was wide open. So I don't know. I mean, do you agree, at least in part, with my double E assessment?
Yeah, I like that. I wish I would have thought of it. But that's exactly right. I mean, it's intriguing. There's some things that you go, okay, that shows you something going forward you want to see more of. But to draw hard and fast conclusions based on 58 games is really impossible and really not fair and not functional. So I think it's like I said at the beginning, this was going to be 2 months of baseball, and thank God we had 2 months of baseball. But it's standalone. It's an outlier. It was just made for our entertainment. And going forward, there's a whole lot of messy things organizationally that they have to sort through based upon the fact that so many players in the system had a 0 competitive baseball this year, developmental age players, so it's not optimal. We hope we don't ever have to do it again.
So we're sitting here talking about how it's going to be hard to evaluate these players for next season who will make that final roster. What kind of factors do you think the staff is considering when it comes to Al Avila and his staff? What are they looking for? What will they look for next season?
Well, it's not so much what they're looking for. It's what they've known about these players, why that they brought them in. It's more the backtrack they saw in these 2 months. At least I hope. I mean, I think some of these things will validate what they knew about players. And then some of the things will just have to be disregarded. I mean, just like, okay, it happened, we saw it, but given the circumstances, it has no bearing going forward. So I think the harder questions are going to be, okay, you look at it and around the diamond, I mean, what set pieces are there? And that's what they have to figure out first. And that will determine who they go after, how many players they go after, and where they are just up and down the 40-man roster.
There's all kinds of questions. We could go by position, but there's a couple of things I really do want to get to, but let's first look at some of the veterans that they brought in. Scope, Crone, Romine, Nova, who hardly played because of injury. Do you see any of those guys coming back? Is that one of the tough decisions Avila and his staff will have to make?
Absolutely. I think if they could just pick one, Scope would be the guy that they would need to bring back, just because he was 1.4 WAR. Say that 3 times. But he was valuable, and there's no second baseman unless they think Nico Goodrum's going to be the second baseman next year, which I don't think is the case. Then I think he's really valuable. The coming up, the prospect wise, Cody Clemens might be the closest, and he's 2 years away or a year and a half away. So if they could bring Scope back, he might draw interest from other teams though, because he was good, he was valuable, and it might be tough for them to bring back. But Austin Romine behind the plate, what did we see there? We saw a few weeks very, very good, and then we saw he start to get beat up a little bit, and then the batting average went down, plummeted really. So I think they need to get a catcher. I really do. I don't think Austin's one of the guys they bring back. CJ Cron, they would love to bring back, but there's so many concerns about the knee. When will he even be ready to play next year? They don't know. So they might have to move on from that. I don't think they're going to have to bring in veteran pitchers for sure. And I don't know if they want to give Ivan Nova another run or not. There'll be a lot of pitchers in their price range available, I would think. So they're going to have to at least bring in. That's a whole nother topic, what they're going to do for pitching based off of what happened this year. So those are the basic ones I can think off the top of my head. I think the best one to bring back would be Scope.
Chris, another position that the Tigers are going to have to fill this offseason is that of their manager, with Ron Gardenhire retiring a couple of weeks ago, earlier this season. Is there anybody out there right now that you think would be a good fit, or who do you think might be a candidate for that role?
Well, they've thrown out all the usual names, but the problem is this job is the Tigers next year are still going to be in transition. So is somebody going to come in that wants to put up with that for 1 year and like be their first job and then go through that? Maybe a more veteran guy. But I can't say right now. I mean, the guys I know, there's a lot of guys they're looking at who are in the postseason right now. There's the Houston manager is still suspended until after the World Series. He's in the mix. So there's going to be a ton of names. I don't think Al's list is as long as the names that are being thrown out there right now. I would not completely rule out Lloyd coming back, just for the simple fact that it is a transition year. And these players have made strides with the coaching staff that's here. Rick Anderson, the pitching coach, Joe Vavra, the hitting coach. There was tangible evidence of progress with those guys working with the younger players. So there's an argument to be made for that for a short term with another year of transition. Or maybe they just go ahead and they start the new regime right now and just ride out this 2021.
When you look at some of the players that have been up and people, do you see Mize and Skubal part of this rotation next year for the Tigers? Even though, as you said, they're going to have to go out and at least get maybe one or if not two veteran arms.
Here's the problem, Art. The problem is, yeah, they're part of the rotation, 100%. But they threw 28 innings or whatever, 20 to 30 innings. So you can't expect them to throw that few innings in 2020 and then throw 200 innings or close to it the next year. It's not going to. That's not a healthy progression. So they're going to be on the rotation, but there's going to be an extreme innings limit to those guys. Michael Fulmer is going to be in the rotation. Same thing. I mean, he's a older and a veteran pitcher, so his window is a little bigger in terms of how many innings they can pitch. But that's the whole problem, and it's league-wide. Matthew Boyd went from 180 innings to 80 innings. So he's going to ratchet back up to 180 innings the next year? I mean, you're putting some strain on arms and bodies that is not the norm. So I don't know how they're going to work through that. That's why I think they're going to have to be a lot of at least like between the major leagues and AAA, they got to have 10 to 12 starters, I believe, or have a whole bunch of guys like Daniel Norris and Tyler Alexander who can give you those piggyback starts and those 3 and 4 inning middle relief kind of roles, because there's going to be a lot of innings to have to be eaten up next year, just for the simple fact that the guys can't go 32 starts next year.
Well, Chris, I'm sorry, Dave, I was thinking, I went back from the day, I mean, it just occurred to me, we've gone from the day where there were 4 starters to 5 starters. Next year, it could be 7 starters. I mean, seriously, I mean, it's going to be really kind of bizarre to see how it plays out.
It is, and it goes. The whole progression goes from throwing, fastball, curveball, changeup to sliders and split fingered pitches and all kinds of other. And throwing instead of the average fastball being 90 miles an hour, it's like 95 now. So there's a lot more wear and tear on arms these days, and pitchers are babied more than ever. So all those things, you throw them in a pot, and you're not getting Mickey Lolich anymore.
Chris, one last question for you. I asked this to Dan Dickerson on Tuesday as well, so I want to get your thoughts on it. Miguel Cabrera really showed some flashes this season of being healthy and just kind of like that young Miguel Cabrera that we all remember, especially towards the end of the season. He had 10 home runs, which led the team. Do you have any new outlook or any other insight on what you think Miguel Cabrera has left in the tank?
I mean, if he's healthy, we're not going to see the young Miguel Cabrera ever again. Sorry to say, that was an incredible beast of a hitter back in the day. But if he's healthy, he can be somewhat productive. He's not going to hit 30 home runs. I can't say, I don't know, but I think he's going to be productive. Put it that way. He'll be productive. He won't be like he was last year, where it was just painful to watch him. I think it's there. I think it's still in him. The when he started hitting those balls with 100 miles an hour plus exit velo, that was a really good sign. He was getting the bat through the zone fast again with quick hands like he used to. And if he stays that way, but listen, I temper all this every time I talk about Miguel. That knee's not fixed. It's never going to be fixed. It's bone on bone. Right. It's a chronic pain, and it's always going to be there. And his back pain is going to always be there. So it's not like he's going to find the fountain of youth down in Miami this offseason, come back swatting 40 home runs. That's just not going to be the way it is. But he can still, if he keeps the weight off and he keeps somewhat pain free, which is never going to be, he can be productive.
Chris, real quickly, people are going to ask, you're going to get bombarded with it. I'm going to get bombarded with it, especially once they open up the bars and people see us in there, enjoying ourselves. I've run into Chris more than once. But with that said, Spencer Torkelson, Riley Green, do they get a call up next season? Do you see a progression there?
Maybe a September call up for one or both. It's hard to say again with they spent the year playing inter squad games in Toledo, so you don't know what kind of development. I would think by next semester, I think Riley could be up, because Riley just looks above the curve to me. Spencer Torkelson, when I saw him, he had some swing changes he's going to have to go through to hit at this level. I felt like not major, not retooling, but he just looked like it was going to be a progression for him. But for sure, 22, look for them in 22.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and throughout the entire season. It's been great talking to you, great getting your insight. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys. Have a great off season.
You too, Chris.
We will. We will. Thank you, Chris. And a big thank you to McLaren Healthcare for presenting Brush Street Beat right here on the Word on Woodward.